Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for your time. Today, we're going to be talking about aquatic herbicide permitting process. But before I get into the presentation, a little background on myself and the company I work for. So my name's Rob Negan, as Janice mentioned. I've been a division manager at Greenstream Lawn and Vegetation Management. I started with Greenstream in 2015. Greenstream was established in 2012. Greenstream has been conducting various aquatic exterminations since 2015, and we're based out of Oakville with satellite offices in Ridgetown and Waterdown. I personally started in the vegetation management business in 2008, and I've been a licensed aquatic exterminator since 2009. So with any pest, it is imperative that it is properly identified before a control method is selected. A wide range of control methods, including physical, mechanical, chemical, and biological, are available. No single method is best in all situations. All have advantages and disadvantages. Consequently, each site should be carefully assessed to determine which method will result in the least harm to the environment. Today, I'll be talking to you about applying for a permit to conduct a water extermination through chemical control. So first off, who can apply? Well, in Ontario, the sale, use, transportation, storage, and disposal of federally registered pesticides are regulated under the Pesticide Act and Regulation 6309. Under Section 7-2 of the Act prescribes that no person shall perform a water extermination except under and in accordance with a permit issued by a director appointed under the Act. So first off, we need an approved permit. The legislation also requires that the person performing the extermination be appropriately licensed. Aquatic exterminations for control of aquatic plants in open water bodies would require an aquatic vegetation class of water extermination license. So second, we need a license. If the extermination is performed by a contractor for a fee or payment, the contractor must hold an operator's license. So we can clearly see we need three things to commercially apply pesticides in Ontario: an approved permit, an operator's license, and an exterminator's license. So what is the purpose of the permit and why do we need it? Well, the permit system prevents excessive and indiscriminate use of pesticides by ensuring proper pesticide selection, by authorizing the amount of pesticides that may be purchased and used, and by setting forth conditions under which it may be used. So where do we get them from? How long does it take? And when should we apply? Aquatic pesticide permits are processed by Ministry Regional Pesticide Specialists that are located in the Ministry's Drinking Water Environmental Compliance Division regional offices for the geographical area for the proposed extermination. So we need to determine which regional office would be responsible for making a decision on a treatment area within their location. All that information is available online to choose the correct regional office. The ministry's service standard for processing and making a decision on a pesticide permit application is no greater than 45 days. So we want to at least apply for a permit 45 days prior to our intended start date. The MOE encourages early submission of completed application forms and supported documentation. Submission will be reviewed and considered for approval subject to site-specific terms and conditions appended to the permit. In Ontario, in order to protect the fish during their spawning and nursery periods, the MNR has established a fish timing window guideline for in-water work. The timing windows are determined by the species of fish present in the water body as well as climatic and site-specific conditions. In Southern Ontario, in-water work is typically not permitted prior to July 1st, and in Central Ontario is typically not permitted prior to July 15th. Therefore, I typically apply for permits within mid-March to May. So now, let's see what the ministry thinks about when assessing an application for a permit to perform a water extermination. The ministry considers the pesticide product proposed for the application and a number of site-specific factors. These product and site considerations can include, but are not necessarily limited to, is the pesticide product federally registered, and does it include label directions for the proposed aquatic use and aquatic plant to be controlled? Is the proposed application rate in accordance with the label instructions? Does the product label include specific restrictions for use in aquatic environments, and are those accounted for in the permit application? Is the application to be performed by an appropriately licensed applicator? The geographical location of the proposed application area, and this would be done by submitting maps of the application area. Has the landowner authorized the extermination? And very importantly, have adjacent landowners been notified of the proposed application? What are the water uses in the vicinity of the proposed application area? Example, are there drinking water intakes or other sensitive water users such as public beaches in the vicinity? Is there a potential for impact to fish and/or species at risk? This would usually require consultation with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry and/or the Federal Department of the Fisheries and Oceans. Is there a need to adjust application timing and location, example, to avoid impact? And have local Indigenous communities been engaged and have their concerns been addressed? All right, now that we know what they're considering and assessing, how do we get this information compiled and sent over to the MOE? The first thing we want to do is fill out an application form to perform a water extermination. As we can see, this form includes various information and separated into different parts. Part 1 would be the applicant information. This would be where the name of the applicant themselves, their address, contact information, where the approved permit would need to be sent to. Second would be the pesticide and site information. In there, we would find the name of the pest we are wishing to control, the name of the pesticide intended to be used, the active ingredient, the amount to be used, also site information of the area intended to be treated, location of the treatment area, and what the water is being used for in and around the treatment area. Next would be notifications. Was a notification made, and were there any objections, and when was it made? And finally, the exterminator's information. Who will be conducting the extermination, and their information about their licenses and their operator's license, and is it signed? So we can see that a majority of the required information is answered on the form, but there is other stuff to be submitted. Let's take a look at the additional information to be submitted. First would be a site map of the area being treated. Next would be a location map of the area being treated, a consent form from the owner of the land under the water, notifications given to adjacent landowners that a permit application is being submitted, a multiple property permit application participant signature form, and potentially a Trent Severn waterway permit. So let's take a deeper look into what a site map entails. So first off, depending on the type of property you are applying for, would require different requirements on the site map. A general rule would be to follow all these points. So first, the location of all participating properties in relation to the neighboring non-participating properties and nearby distinguishing landmarks, including vacant lots, crown lands, right-of-ways, or public access areas if applicable. The size of the treatment areas, including the length, the width, and the average depth. The length of the frontages along the shorelines for each participating property. The location of all water intakes, docks, boat slips, etc. in front of the participating and adjacent properties. For marinas and commercial establishments, the layout of the marina including all property boundaries, all intakes, docks, boat slips, boat ramps, loading areas, and public common use areas. Also to note that treatment areas should be limited to navigation channels only. The map may be hand-drawn so long as it clearly depicts all these requirements. So as we can see here on the left, here's an example of a site map for a marina or a commercial establishment. It has all the requirements required, and it outlines the treatment area quite clearly with all measurements so that you know how much herbicide is to be used. Next, we want to include a location map. A location map is used for the ministry to do a site visit if needed. These should include sufficient quality, detail, and scale, identifying the location of the properties in relation to neighboring towns, cities, major roads, water bodies, with specific directions to the property. Also included is letter of permission or statements of permissions. Again, it depends on the type of property you're applying for. A letter of the permission from a water lot owner authorizing the use of aquatic herbicides. Now, if this is Crown land, a statement must be included indicating that the water lot is owned by the Crown. If you are unsure, you can always contact your local Ministry Natural Resource Office, and they will help you out identifying that. A written statement signed by each property owner or manager acknowledging the use of an aquatic herbicide by a licensed exterminator and all applicable water use restrictions. So we need to make the manager or the owner of the establishment aware of the water restrictions as well. And for common use areas owned or managed by an association or group, for example, a yacht club, the statement must indicate that the support of the members and the authority to provide consent on the members' behalf to authorize the treatment. If we're applying for more than one property on one permit, we'll need to include a multiple property permit applicant participant signature form. As we can see an example of this here on the left, there's a column for the name, address, telephone number, original signature, and date of each participant. This must be included in any application that involves more than one property. On the right-hand side, we can see an example of what a site map of a multiple property permit application would look like. As you can see, we don't want to just treat the entire area, but we have certain areas to be treated, and that is based on the lengths of the frontages of the property. To find out those requirements, I urge you to refer to the Applicant Guide for Aquatic Plant Control Guide, which can be found online and explains these treatment areas. Lastly, if you're applying for a permit on the Trent Severn Waterway, a Trent Severn Waterway permit would be required. As a result of public concern, Parks Canada Trent Severn Waterway has initiated a process of reduced herbicide use in the waterway. All applications for permits to perform a water extermination submitted to the MOE for water exterminations on the Trent Severn Waterway will also require prior review and approval by Parks Canada. This is done by filling out this permit, and this approval must be in place before the MOE can approve their permit. So once you've compiled all that information and sent it off, and the assessment of the permit application is complete, the director will make a decision on whether or not to issue the permit to perform a water extermination. If the director is satisfied that the water extermination can be performed in a safe and effective manner, the permit will be issued. The director may include site-specific terms and conditions on the permit to ensure the water extermination is performed in a safe and effective manner. These terms and conditions can include, but are not necessarily limited to, specific timelines for the proposed application, requirements for public notifications, buffer zones, setbacks from sensitive receptors, monitoring requirements, establishment of a complement response process, submission of a monitoring and project summary reports to the ministry. So here's an example of what approval would look like. As we see, we have all the information we need to proceed with the extermination. We have the terms where it shows herbicide to use, amount to use, the areas to be treated, and timing. We have conditions we need to follow, and it is signed by the director. So we're good to go. We can do the extermination now. But let's take a closer look at the conditions. Two that stand out to me are under notifications. So first, it's advanced notifications. Before any extermination is to be conducted, all adjacent landowners, lessees, or affected parties must be notified a minimum of 48 hours prior to commencement of the treatment. It is recommended that this notification is in written format and would include information regarding the proposed treatment timeline and restrictions on the use imposed by the pesticide label. This needs to be done at least 48 hours prior to the treatment so that if there are any objections or questions, they can be addressed without interruption. Second, immediately prior to treatment for public or common use areas with pesticides, signs must be erected adjacent to the water body to be treated. These signs should have all relevant information as outlined on the conditions of the approved permit. They should be posted at any access point to the water body that is being treated, and they must remain in place for 5 days, or as the label states. On the 6th day, it is up to the applicator to make sure that these signs are removed. So that's it. Once you've done all these steps, you can conduct your extermination. In conclusion, in order to receive an approved permit, we need to supply the Ministry of Environment with a filled-out application to perform a water extermination, a permission form from the owner, a location map, a site map, and any additional supporting documents. I also want you to remember that the use of aquatic herbicides is regulated and controlled through the issuing of permits. The conditions attached to a permit are part of a legally binding document. The use of an aquatic pesticide without a permit or in contradiction of the conditions outlined in a permit is considered a violation of the Pesticide Act and associated regulations. A violation of the legislation is subject to the penalties for offenses outlined under the Pesticide Act and will be considered when assessing future requests for permits. Also remember that the acquisition of a permit or a license does not divest any individual or commercial applicator of the responsibility for any undesirable consequence arising from treatment. Anyone applying any substance without the authority of a license or permit or violating any of the terms and conditions of a permit is guilty of an offense under the Pesticide Act and upon conviction is liable to a fine. So thank you for your time. I hope you found this presentation helpful in your process for applying for a permit to perform a water extermination. I want you to remember that the ministry has decades of experience in processing and reviewing permit applications and will help with all your needs, as I know from personal experience. The Permit for Aquatic Plant Control Applicant Information Guide is a very valuable resource and can be found online. In this document, you'll find all the information needed to submit the correct information, follow correct guidelines, and determining correct treatment areas, and I urge you to refer to this guide. And again, thank you. So that's it. Is there any questions or? I don't see any.
Yes, thank you so much, Robin. You provided a lot of really excellent information there. And also, too, I hope it gives everyone comfort that just because we are going to have an aquatic herbicide available for fry control, there's a lot of checks and balances in place there to ensure that whoever's doing the application is doing it appropriately. So that should alleviate a lot of concerns in the public that it's not just a lot of herbicide being applied there. So, Robin, thank you so much. I should mention that a lot of these presentations are being recorded, and that information that you've provided will be available for folks to have a close look at. My screen, it was a little small, I couldn't read, but you covered it fantastically. Thank you. In all
no problem.
Provided. Yeah. I don't see too many questions there. So, and Rob, I think are you staying for the rest of the meeting as well today?
I'll try to, yeah, for the majority of it, yeah.
Super, thank you. So if any of you have anything you want to discuss with Rob, I'm sure you can find him at one of the tables there as well. So thank you so much.